In this episode, we're going to be talking spool design. Let's jump into it. Welcome to this episode of DIY3DTech.com. In this episode of Design Talk, I'm here with the BQMagic. And instead of a BQMagic episode, I decided to make this a Design Talk episode because what I did is I created a new spool for the BQMagic Delta 3D printer. And spools aren't that exciting. But what I wanted to talk about is more so about the design of this rather than the functionality of this. However, to kind of lead up to what was my problem, why did I need to create a new spool holder? Well, it's this guy right here, and it happens to be this little pin is the problem. Because if you take a look at the spools that come with the BQMagic, they have these holes in them in which this spool actually goes in and sits, and then this pin locks in and supposedly provides some sort of positive indexing. I have no idea the logic why. However, when you want to change spools, because I picked up these AIO Robotics spools of filament, and this is really good filament, by the way, folks. I'll have some links to this below. Prints very much like rigid ink, but at a fraction of the cost. Well, the problem is, if I go to put this on here, well, even though the center fits, this pin stops it from going on. Now, your first reflex might just to say, well, I'm going to cut this off and be done with it. Why do I need that on there? I felt that's kind of crude. I don't know, just cutting it off. Anyways, I kind of like taking your appendix out. You don't need it, but, if you can live with it, why not? Anyways, I digress. So what I decided to do is I hit Fusion 360 and I designed a new one. I thought it would be kind of interesting to do anyway because I wanted it a little bit different. So one of the things that I started with is when I took a look at this to start with the design, I thought the size was genuinely pretty good. So basically we had a 100 millimeter outer diameter. We had a 52 millimeter inner, and you notice the bearing, and the bearing sits on this bushing, and we got this screw that connects it. So I liked that design in general. So what I did is I designed this for a 608 skate bearing. So I've got tons of these. It's a great bearing. I like the idea of a bearing design. And then one of the things with the bearing, you notice, is that it has a race here and an outer race. And so what I did is I designed up a top piece as I drop it that goes in the top, and the bolt goes through the top piece. And what happens is this rests on this race, so this spins freely. The same with the bottom piece, if I don't drop it again this time, is it has a lip that again sits on the race, and then this distributes the weight on the top of the printer over there and goes in the bottom. So this goes in the bottom as so. It take a little bit of a pressure fit to fit these in, and so it'd be nice and tight. And again, I modeled all this in Fusion 360, and I got to tell you guys, Fusion 360 just amazes me. Just how much you can do so quickly. Now, the other piece I did, you notice the difference between here and here. One of the things, this really bears very little weight, so it doesn't need this solid piece of plastic. So to save plastic and also speed up printing, I just replicated these holes around the outer diameter of this in a PCD function, and boom, saved a lot of plastic, a lot of time. I also made this a little bit thinner. I went with 2 millimeters. This is about 5. I didn't see a reason to make it that thick because most of it's just resting on this collar area right here. So let's go ahead. I'll put this on the BQMagic over here, and then we'll take a look at it on and see what it looks like. Okay, so here we are with a close-up, and there we have it. So actually, I think this looks pretty cool. So this is one of the reasons I also wanted to 3D print something rather than just take a hacksaw and cut that little post off, because again, I think this adds some unique appeal. Also, functionally, it's very cool. I have a much larger bearing, and also notice that the design in this, the way I've also got this, the way I cut this bearing to distribute the load, actually is pretty interesting. And look how I actually come up over this space surface here and encapsulate the bearing, but yet leave this area open, so it spins super smooth. So I'm sure to get good filament feed, and it looks pretty neat. So hopefully you found it interesting. I'll have this file out on Thingiverse, and so if you're interested in it, you have a BQMagic or another printer. I mean, it's just basically you can come up with just about any size of the bolt. I think it's like this is like an M10 or something like that. So if you have another printer, another use, hey, feel free to grab this out on Thingiverse. And don't forget to hit that bell button out there. And so you go down there and notified of new content. Swag Shop's up in the corner. And hey, be sure you're a subscriber. Really helps the channel out. Cheers.
Please click like below and subscribe to the channel.